Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. I'm not exactly sure how to review this one, but today we are reviewing Otter Still by DN Bryn, and my confusion comes from the fact that this is technically the first in its series, yet it is very difficult to talk about anything in this book without spoiling a book in a different series. So, this book takes place in the same universe as the author's other works in the These Treacherous Tides series, namely Our Bloody Pearl or Once Stolen. Now, it does not really reference anything or spoil anything from Our Bloody Pearl. That book is basically a standalone as it stands right now. However, the main character of this one is a side character in Once Stolen, a very prominent one, and it directly references things that happen in that story and the setting of that story. So technically, this is a different series, and if you're not interested in reading the These Treacherous Tides series, you can just start here and possibly get spoiled. But if you're interested in the full continuity, I will have my review for Once Stolen down in the description below, and hopefully if you decide to continue anyways, I won't spoil too much. So, this book revolves around our boy Ruben, who was the hesitant cartel leader of Once Stolen, who was basically forced into that position because some nefarious outlanders, foreigners who were not known to the swampy murk he called home, wanted to steal these little magical rocks that power everything called Ignites. But not just steal those little rocks, but also the things that create them, the auroras as they are called. And in the midst of trying to steal these things, Ruben gets one attached to him, right to his neck. And the author described it to me as venom but fantasy and gay. So, right away I was interested. And it proved to be correct. There is an actual interpersonal relationship between Ruben and the parasite. I particularly liked the way the parasite communicated with him, in that it would basically repurpose his own memories in his head and bring up snippets of old conversations in a new context to try and communicate. I thought that was really cool. But he turned to this young Selkie man named Tavish, who is from this very wealthy corporate family, and they have a lot of scientists and things that are working on ignites and auroras, and so he enlists Tavish's help. Kind of not the most moral of ways, but he's supposed to be a morally great character anyway. And they end up going to the below the sea city, Marahim, to try and see if they can't get the parasite off of Ruben. But once they get there, a bunch of plot happens, right when they get there. And I'm going to try to spoil as little as possible. But this is definitely a story that's all about the evils of capitalism and how, capitalist families and rich families are basically modern nobility, that kind of vibe. But I did love Tavish as a character. I've grown very accustomed to DN Bryn's love of putting all sorts of both queer and disabled rep in their stories, as well as different people of color as well. Ruben, I'm not sure exactly what ethnicity he is specifically, but he is darker skinned. I don't know if they're supposed to be a direct one-to-one comparison to any real world ethnicity we have, because this is a fantasy world, but he does have his hair in braids and everything. And Tavish, our Selkie boy from the rich family, is trans and blind. And I was really interested in that because I loved how the author took all the deaf characters from Once Stolen, so I was really interested to see how this one came in. But it is quite notable because I started noticing a trend in the way the author notes their romances in the stories. It definitely seems to be a case of you have your protagonist who is apathetic as a result of trauma or abuse and doesn't care about the world, and they meet a overly earnest and eager person that just wants to do the most. Because in all three of the books I've read of the author so far, that's always the dynamic. Now, it is not exactly the same. I did not want to imply that it was just copy and paste. Probably the biggest difference that I can note from the romance, especially in Our Bloody Pearl compared to this one, is In Our Bloody Pearl, both the protagonists of that one are canonically ace, and the protagonists of this book are not, very much not asexual. Reuben will just sit next to Tavish and his brain is immediately like, he is so close. And he goes on and on just about being close to Tavish constantly. It's adorable, but also he's just so horny for the Selkie man. It's great. I loved that aspect. I loved their, I guess you could almost say, competing character arcs in a way, because Reuben's arc was very much, he had stopped caring about the world as a result of kind of being forced in this weird limbo culturally where he never really fit in anywhere. And Tavish cares a ton, but he hasn't quite realized that he's not doing the good that he thinks he is because his privilege is blinding him to seeing it. And seeing those two, like, one has to learn to care and one has to learn that his caring isn't actually doing what he thinks it's doing, was very interesting arcs to watch develop in tandem, and I really enjoyed that. Now, the one big struggle I had, and I didn't remove a star for this because it was totally just me, the underwater city, in theory, is really cool because it has to operate in certain ways, and technically all of the people within it, because they are Selkies that can transform into seals, and I think there's some other mer people as well, they can technically live underwater, but instead they live in an actual air breathing city, basically because they can't talk as seals, so it's how they do business. But I had the hardest time wrapping my brain around it, and it is safe to say that I can struggle with descriptions of places in general. It's why I don't tend to do a lot of high fantasies, just because of the non-normal, not unreal settings. But this one was extra hard because when I kept thinking underwater city, I kept thinking BioShock. But that's not the theme they're going for. It's not Art Deco. It's not vintage or retro themed. It's very much supposed to be like, this one area is cold and gray and dismal, and this one area is overly fancy and opulent. Everything got whitewashed in my head, or I guess just washed in my head, to this is basically BioShock. It was really hard to shake my brain out of that. And at one point where, again, speaking vaguely because spoilers, there was a thing happening to a place. Sure, let's go with that. And I had to reread it 5 times to understand exactly what was happening to the place. And that kind of thing slowed it down. But I didn't remove a star, because that's a me thing. I struggle with that a lot. Although I didn't struggle with it in One Stolen at all. I loved the Merc. The Merc, the swamp from One Stolen was chef's kiss. Love that setting. It's my favorite setting of any of these books. So I was annoyed at myself that I couldn't get as much into this one. Although I did like the one Finfolk village you see. That one was cool. I got that one a little bit better. It was just the mechanics of the underwater city were getting to me. But regardless, the plot moves very fast. A lot of things are going on. A lot of giant reveals and things. And for the most part, beyond Reuben reminiscing about what happened in the Merc in One Stolen, or the parasite bringing up his own memories, it is its own story. I can see why it was made its own series. It's just Reuben as a character ties it together, may accidentally spoil things. But I did really enjoy the plot. There was a lot of twists and turns up until the very end. Or I guess not even the very, very end. The last chunk of the book. Maybe not the last full third, but it felt like there were 4 or 5 climactic scenes strung together in a row at the very end. There was multiple times where I thought to myself, oh, this is it. No, this is it. Because there'd be another reveal, another major thing, another big political thing happens, or a personal thing happens, and I'm like, oh no, this! Multiple times that happened. And even to the point where Reuben himself was like, I can't relax, something else might happen. I'm like, okay, it's not just me. It's not just me, this is just the thing. And in general, that could have worked. I love giant endings. I've talked about that before. I love big, angsty, dramatic reveals and all of that. The big thing is it was just too many things too close together. And as a result, I kind of hit that wall where my emotions had peaked and I wasn't going to be able to push them any farther. The emotional battery was done. Anything that happened after that wasn't going to get the emotional response out of me. It was just going to be a thing that happened. So when the last big thing happened, I was like, okay, how's that? What's going to top this? Like, I couldn't even, like, had already left me. I'd already hit my last and nothing else was going to come out. So that was a little bit of a sad part there. But I did enjoy a lot of the ideas that were brought up. Most of them, again, spoiler things, but some things are revealed about how the auroras work and how the Ignites work and how the aurora attached to Rubin is going to work. And it made for some very surreal narrative at one point. The very last part of it gets weird in the first person POV style. And then just trying to wrap my brain around all the weird, surreal, science-y, philosophy things that were happening also made all of those repeat climactic events just kind of blur because I still hadn't quite figured out exactly why that thing was happening because the science philosophy of it was not locking, apparently. But overall, I loved the development, both of the romance between Tavish and Rubin. I also loved the relationship between Rubin and his parasite. It is very much like Venom, where Rubin just wants to drink constantly, be drunk, and be lost in his own depressed thoughts. And the parasite is like this little eager thing that wants to care and has a really strong sense of justice and is going to make Rubin take care of himself. This little self-care czar that is going to make sure Rubin does not drink that much alcohol and drinks his water, and it was really funny. I thought that was amusing. But it also adds for great tension throughout the story because, and you can see it on the cover of the book, but like the black lines or they're like black but also iridescent in the right light are like spreading across his body from his neck, and it created a great sense of tension throughout the book. And every time he had to push himself with the help of the parasite to do, superhero or superhuman parasite stuff, it claimed a little bit more of him. Loved that. Loved his inner strife and the angst of that, but also realizing that maybe the parasite is taking him over and he doesn't want to lose himself, but also the parasite is its own living thing. At one point, it came across as very cute. I don't know how a giant lychee parasite can come across adorable, but that happened. So in general, I really, really liked the story. I just got a little bit tripped up at the end with just the sheer amount of stuff that goes on. But it did set up a nice series moving forward. I don't foresee, and this is just me guessing based on the author's previous work, if I had to guess, I don't think the protagonists of these ones are going to be the protagonists of the next one. I have a feeling that the next one is going to take place. Probably, I would love to see more of the Finfolk. I really liked the Finfolk. And they'll probably be like side characters or connecting characters or something like that, the way that there was a connecting characters from Our Bloody Pearl to Once Stolen. And I would be interested to read that, obviously. I'm still excited to read more of this. I think I saw myself the most in Tavish of any character that DN Bryn has written, just in that you think you were doing all this good stuff, only the more you learn, you realize that the good stuff you thought you were doing wasn't actually doing what you thought you were doing. That's me with all my new eco-friendly stuff and all of here's all these eco-friendly myths you believed in that aren't actually helping the planet. And you're like, well, crap. What do I do now? But in general, loved it. Gave it 4 stars, but highly recommend it. If you've enjoyed any of the things that the author has written before, you'll like this one. If you want more blind or trans rep in your speculative fiction, this is definitely the one for it. Tavish is some great representation. Love the little princeling. And also there are some great cats. Some great cat side characters for you. Blue and Lavender are adorable. Regardless, if you are an indie author and you are interested in a review like this one, I will have my information down in the description below. Please be sure to review my review policy. It answers a lot of questions and saves us a lot of time. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.